We live in an age drowning in information, but starving for clarity. Everyone scrolls for answers, but few stop to ask the right questions. Is intelligence really about knowing more or about staying calm when everything around you is chaos? Modern society tells you emotions are authentic, so you should express everything you feel. But what if the Stoics were right that unfiltered emotion is not truth, but slavery? That wisdom comes not from venting, but from restraint? We celebrate degrees, titles, and IQ scores, yet look at our lives. Burnout, anxiety, broken relationships. If intelligence is about being smart, why are so many of us still lost? Maybe real intelligence isn't what we've been taught at all. Welcome to StoicCraft, where we take timeless Stoic wisdom and bring it into the modern world so you can think sharper, live smarter, and find calm strength in a society that constantly pulls you off balance. There are mornings when you wake up with a question you can't quite name. Life seems normal on the surface, yet inside your head feels tangled. You try to focus, to push forward, to do the right thing, but suddenly a wave of emotion crashes over you. Fear that whispers you're not enough, anger that rises faster than you expect, doubt that lingers like background noise, and deep down, you know this isn't about determination or willpower. What you're missing is not effort. It's a set of principles that can cut through the fog and bring clarity to your mind. That's where Stoicism enters, not as an ancient relic, but as a living compass. It was the same compass that guided emperors in times of war, slaves in moments of suffering, and ordinary people in everyday struggles. Stoicism was never meant to gather dust in a philosophy book. It is a way of thinking designed to steady you when the world spins too fast, to keep you calm when chaos presses in, and to help you live deliberately instead of reacting blindly. In this journey, you'll discover 15 timeless lessons from Stoic thinkers, not to turn you into an armchair philosopher, but to equip you with depth, standards, and self-mastery qualities we desperately need in a world drowning in distraction. And the very first lesson is one you might have overlooked your whole life. Intelligence has less to do with knowing and more to do with staying calm when everything falls apart, then making the right call anyway. If no one has ever told you that, then now is the moment to learn. For too long, we've been trained to think of intelligence as a score, a degree, or an impersonal IQ number. We celebrate people who memorize facts quickly, calculate faster, and speak with authority. But the real world doesn't reward machines. It demands something more flexible, something more deeply human. It demands a form of intelligence that can step back, observe, stay silent when silence is wiser, and listen before speaking. You've probably met people who shine in one area, yet stumble in another. The brilliant debater who wins every argument but makes a mess of their personal relationships. The genius with equations who collapses under the weight of a simple apology. These examples remind us, sharpness is not in the storage of knowledge, but in the vision to see deeper into ourselves, into others, into reality as it is. That's the heartbeat of Stoic philosophy. It doesn't teach you how to look clever. It teaches you how to live wisely, to understand that knowledge, no matter how vast, is wasted unless it leads to the right action. Have you ever found yourself knowing exactly what should be done, but unable to apply it when the moment came. That isn't stupidity, it's the gap between knowing and doing. Stoicism exists to close that gap. A sharp mind isn't one that collects data like a computer. A sharp mind is one that knows when to speak, when to act, and when to wait. Wisdom is the art of timing, an art you can't learn from memorizing theories, only by practicing presence. A mother without formal training who raises her children with patience and love often embodies this wisdom more purely than a room full of academics. A worker who saves diligently, treats others fairly, and keeps promises may never have read Seneca, but is already living by Stoic values. Wisdom often wears the face of the ordinary. Society may overlook it because we are obsessed with credentials. But the Stoics remind us that knowledge is only raw material. Reflection, the act of turning knowledge into lived clarity, is what refines that material into wisdom. The real question isn't, what do I know? But am I living what I know? When was the last time you asked yourself, am I doing this because it's right or because I just want to win? That one question can change the direction of a life. Jesus once said, "You will know them by their fruits." We don't judge wisdom by eloquence or lofty words, but by what it produces: peace, clarity, resilience. A person may speak beautifully, write elegantly, and still live a life filled with bitterness and blame. In the end, you don't truly know something until you live it, especially when life turns cruel. Anyone can seem composed when things are easy, but wisdom reveals itself when you're hurt, humiliated, or tested. The wiser someone becomes, the less they feel the need to prove it with words. Not because they lack ideas, but because they understand that truth doesn't need to be shouted. It only needs to be lived. Their calm presence, the consistency between word and deed, that's the signature of a truly sharp mind. You don't need to wait for a grand opportunity to begin. Start small. Observe your reactions when criticized, when treated unfairly, when outcomes disappoint. Do you stay grounded or do you lash out? Just noticing your patterns is the first step toward deeper intelligence. Awareness itself is a victory. The world today doesn't suffer from a lack of information. What it suffers from is a lack of clarity. And clarity doesn't come from cramming more into your head. It comes from clearing out the illusions that cloud your sight. Do you listen to others, or are you only waiting for your turn to reply? Do you examine your motives, or do you assume you're right because you've thought hard about it? These questions aren't meant to shrink you. They're meant to open you. These questions aren't meant to make you feel small. They exist to help you begin living more wisely, starting exactly where you are. A person who lives wisely doesn't just manage time. They manage mental energy. They don't allow their attention to be hijacked by meaningless arguments, toxic headlines, or unrealistic expectations. They guard their mind like a dedicated gatekeeper, deciding what is allowed in and what must stay out. They know emotions come and go, so they don't let emotions take the wheel. Anger, anxiety, envy, all of these are signals, not commands. That's why, in the fog of uncertainty, they move like a steady-handed pilot, not panicking, only adjusting course. Truly intelligent people don't measure themselves against others. They measure themselves against who they were yesterday. They don't grow by proving they are right, but by living with more honesty, more depth, more kindness. And that doesn't come from a degree or a weekend seminar. It comes from daily practice, every action, every choice. Every quiet moment of self-reflection is progress. If you still doubt it, think about the people you truly admire. They may not be the smartest in the conventional sense, yet there's something about them that earns your trust. That's because they live clearly. They don't say one thing and do another. They don't run on autopilot. They have depth, and depth cannot be faked. So if you want to think sharper and live smarter, start with this simple truth. Intelligence isn't just about what you know, but about how you use it to live more truthfully, more clearly, and more purposefully every single day. Ask yourself, am I learning to prove something, to understand something, or to change something? Once you begin to see intelligence through that lens, the next step becomes obvious. Real wisdom doesn't stop at self-analysis. It's fueled by something deeper, curiosity. Not the shallow kind that skims the surface, but a hunger to understand, to know yourself, to grasp how the world works, to connect with others, not to judge, but to truly relate. Stay curious, because the moment you stop being curious, you stop learning. And when you stop learning, you stop truly living. Have you ever paused not to find an answer, but simply to ask a deeper question? Not, what's for lunch? Or, where should we go this weekend? But something that shakes you awake. Am I living or just existing? Or even simpler, why do I believe this? These questions ignite awakenings, because the greatest danger isn't ignorance, it's the illusion of already knowing. Epictetus warned, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. A closed mind free of doubt, free of questions, free of reflection, is no different from a machine stuck on repeat. Questions are light. They shine into the corners of our mind we prefer to avoid. And all great minds share one habit. They live inside questions. They don't treat answers as finish lines, but as stepping stones toward the next unknown. That's why Da Vinci filled his notebooks with endless curiosities. Why is the sea salty? Why is the sky blue? Why do humans laugh? How can we mimic the wings of a bat? They may sound childish, but they became the soil for world-changing breakthroughs. One of his notebooks, the Codex Leicester, was bought by Bill Gates for over $30 million, not for the answers, but for the map of a mind that never stopped asking. You don't need to be Leonardo to keep a genius journal. You just need the courage to write down the questions you don't yet have answers for. Whose values am I living by? Was that recent anger justified? When did I adopt this belief? Has it ever been tested? These aren't questions to impress others. They're questions to be honest with yourself. The smarter someone is, the more quietly they take notes, because they know true insights often come not from lectures, but from silence. And this brings us to a rarely explored realm, the subconscious. We often think problem solving is about sitting down, focusing hard, and pushing for answers. But truly creative minds do the opposite. They push their thinking to the edge, then let go. They pour focus into a problem until it tightens. Then they walk away, take a stroll, wash the dishes, sip tea, or stand under a cold shower. And suddenly the idea appears, not out of laziness, but out of strategy. They don't avoid tension, they engineer a useful kind of tension. Eustress, pressure that stretches but doesn't break you. Try this small ritual. Pick one question that unsettles you and write it down. Think deeply about it for 20 minutes, then drop it. Step onto your balcony, fold some laundry, or walk up the stairs. See what surfaces when you stop forcing the answer. And when something does appear, write it down immediately. That's your inner wisdom whispering, and your only job is to create the space to hear it. Finally, turn curiosity into a daily practice. Each morning, write one better question than yesterday. Each afternoon, record one belief you thought was true but never tested. Each evening, choose one idea to act on within 24 hours. Do this long enough, and you'll discover sharpness doesn't come from noisy arguments or showing off cleverness. It comes from the quiet discipline of a mind that keeps asking, keeps testing, and keeps growing. Intelligence is no longer a warehouse of data. It becomes a way of living. Curiosity isn't the privilege of professors or the luxury of intellectual elites. It is the birthright of every free human being. Why? Because curiosity is self-learning in action. And those who commit to self-learning are the ones who shape their own lives instead of waiting for life to shape them. You don't need another degree to live wisely. What you need is an attitude, a self-learning mindset. The kind of mindset that doesn't wait to be spoon-fed, but extracts lessons from everything it encounters. A cab ride, the tension in a waiter's smile, a burst of anger from a colleague, a mistake that stings, even a misunderstanding with a loved one. All of these moments are raw data, if you have the courage to observe and to ask. People say curiosity killed the cat, but in the Stoic worldview, that saying misses the point. Curiosity is not recklessness. It is the disciplined practice of a mind that audits itself daily, questions its impulses, and refuses to be lulled to sleep by ego. Seen in that light, curiosity is not weakness. It is the highest form of inner discipline. Not everyone who lives simply is a Stoic, but anyone who regularly asks, "Is this necessary?" has already taken their first step on the Stoic path. Real curiosity isn't comfortable. It digs where you'd rather not dig. It unsettles beliefs you thought were uncheckable. It forces you to walk into rooms in your mind you've kept closed for years. But that is where growth takes place, not shallow growth, not cosmetic changes, but the kind of deep transformation that rewires who you are. Through this kind of questioning, you begin to understand yourself and others more honestly. Life stops looking like chaos and starts revealing itself as a chain of causes. A well-placed question is the sharpest blade humans possess. It slices through lies, pierces social masks, and taps the wellspring of truth beneath appearances. In a world overflowing with noise and shallow certainty, the person who can remain silent and ask the right question isn't just surviving, they are rewriting the rules. That's why in every religion, philosophy, and scientific revolution, the spark of breakthrough always begins with a question. So ask yourself, are you living guided by questions or drifting on habit? Where's your nearest notebook? When was the last time you wrote down a question that genuinely unsettled you? Do you dare to put on paper the things that confuse, disturb, or challenge you? Or are you merely reacting to life instead of reflecting on it? Awareness doesn't come from grand resolutions made at New Year's. It is born from the small habits you repeat daily. If every day you ask, what did I really understand today? What question is still chasing me? Then you are evolving not loudly, but steadily, because no one grows simply by piling up new facts. Growth happens when you dare to re-question everything you thought you already knew. If you still have even the smallest flicker of curiosity, don't let it fade. Feed it with attention, with seriousness, with steady discipline. Ask, write, observe, experiment. Never accept an answer unless it touches something real inside you. That isn't just sharp thinking. That is intelligent living. There's no need to chase trends. No need to pretend you know everything. Go deeper into reality, moment by moment. Because when you ask the right question, the next step isn't to rush and find someone else's answer. The next step is to become the one who tests it for yourself. Not every belief deserves to be kept. Not every so-called truth will reveal itself easily. Some will only become clear when you're willing to dissect them, debate them, fail with them, and fail forward. And from that brave place, something even rarer is born: intelligent doubt. Doubt that doesn't paralyze you but sharpens you. Doubt that doesn't weaken your resolve but strengthens your honesty. From here, the Stoic path invites us not only to ask, but to begin testing before believing. Because much of what we accept isn't true, it's simply old. These beliefs have been with us so long, carried through family traditions, school lessons, cultural norms, and the silent nod of the crowd, that we mistake them for reality. They form the invisible scaffolding of our thinking. But just like scaffolding, they can also become the low ceiling that blocks our growth. The irony is we can spend our entire lives inside that low ceiling room without ever trying to open the door. Stoicism doesn't demand that you reject everything, but it insists that you examine everything. Nothing, no matter how familiar, how popular, how reasonable it sounds, should be accepted as truth without scrutiny. A Stoic doesn't believe because others believe. A Stoic believes only after testing, doubting, stripping away emotional gloss and logical polish. If a belief survives that process, keep it. If not, let it fall like the final leaf of autumn. No clinging, no regret. But this requires one thing: the courage to betray yourself. Not to betray your values, but to betray the comfort of the old self that felt safe in those beliefs. Most of what we cling to doesn't come from reason. It comes from our need to belong. We adopt the beliefs of family, friends, communities, because not believing would make us feel alone. But Stoic philosophy isn't here to make you comfortable. It's here to make you honest. Imagine standing before a massive tree. You see only its branches and leaves, but it's the roots that decide whether it thrives or withers. Your beliefs are those roots. They shape every thought and action. If you don't know where they came from or what they're feeding on, then no matter how much you trim the branches, your thinking will stay dry, brittle, repetitive. The world doesn't lack intelligence. It lacks people willing to think again. Take Einstein. He wasn't more intelligent than the physicists before him. His strength was in refusing to accept what they all accepted. Newton's theory of absolute time was gospel. Everyone studied it, everyone used it, and everyone stayed trapped by it except Einstein. In his 20s, free from the weight of intellectual conformity, he dared to ask a question that sounded almost naive. What if time isn't absolute? That single, childlike question cracked open the door to relativity and shook the very foundations of modern physics. So the real question isn't, are you as smart as Einstein? The question is, are you willing to ask the kind of questions he dared to ask? Be honest with yourself. How many things in your life do you believe simply because you've heard them repeated too many times? That you're not good enough to pursue what you love, that you should settle for your paycheck because others have it worse, that being a good person is sufficient, and that real success belongs to someone else. These beliefs sound reasonable, but they all share the same poisonous thread: safety, compromise, resignation. They're not truth, they're mental convenience. Inside each of us there are two selves at war. One self longs to see the world as it truly is. The other self wants the world to stay the same so that it never has to change. The ego lives in the second. It whispers, don't question, don't change. Stay where it feels safe. But a life lived like that becomes nothing more than a rerun of yourself. Same script, just a different birthday cake every year. Even Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, warned that the ego resists challenges fiercely. It builds walls it rejects. Anything that doesn't fit its worldview, and it convinces you that your limitations are permanent. And when ego drives, you're not leading, you're reacting. You end up thinking others are luckier, that society is unfair, that opportunity was never meant for you. The truth is harsher. You've simply never dared to question the beliefs that hold you back. Once you begin re-examining your assumptions, you'll start noticing the cracks in the logic all around you. Why is college the only path to success? Why is marriage treated as the ultimate marker of happiness? Why does owning a house mean you're settled? These aren't acts of rebellion. They are acts of realignment. They are chances to define life on your own terms, not according to someone else's blueprint. This isn't a revolution in the streets. It's a revolution of the mind. And when you see clearly, you realize most of your beliefs were never chosen. They were inherited from parents, teachers, culture, textbooks, advertisements, and even the subtle approval of friends. All of it has been programming the operating system in your head. If you've never updated that system, then odds are you're still running belief 1.0 from when you were 10 years old. The beauty of doubt is that it frees you. When you stop assuming everything is true, you create space to choose again: your work, your relationships, your values, your purpose. You become the true architect of your own life, and the world shows you a pattern. Lasting success belongs to those who constantly reset their assumptions. They ask why. They ask, what if the opposite were true? They ask, where's the real evidence? Thomas Edison didn't just test 10,000 different materials for the light bulb. He tested 10,000 different mindsets. Steve Jobs didn't simply design the iPhone, he redesigned the very idea of what a phone could be. Marcus Aurelius, both emperor and philosopher, didn't write his meditations to impress anyone. He wrote them to interrogate himself, to strip away illusion after illusion, reminding himself to be tolerant with others, but uncompromising with his own habits. Starting this process doesn't feel good. It's like peeling away old skin, layer by layer. But the more you shed, the lighter you feel. You begin to see yourself with clarity, not in a mirror, but in the sharp reflection of your own questions, and you'll discover something powerful. You were never weak. You simply placed your trust in the wrong things. Here's a simple practice. Write down 3 things you believe are absolutely true about life, things you often repeat or hear echoed by others. Then, instead of trying to prove them right, try living as if they're wrong. Observe what happens. Notice how your thoughts shift, how your emotions flare, what discomfort arises. This isn't therapy. It's an experiment in truth. You don't need validation from anyone. You just need the courage to test yourself. One day you'll thank yourself for it. The world is already full of voices telling you what to believe. Wisdom begins when you listen to the quieter voice inside and dare to ask it. Are you sure? But reason alone won't carry you all the way. Some limits can't be shattered by logic or language. They can only be broken by direct experience, by seeing with your eyes, feeling with your skin, trusting the quiet signals of your body. If you want to live sharper, you must relearn how to see, how to hear, how to touch the world as if it were brand new. Think back. When was the last time you truly learned something deeply? Was it while you were memorizing a complex formula? Or was it when you overheard a single offhand comment that lingered in your mind for days? What strikes the senses strikes the mind. Geniuses don't just think, they feel, they observe, they sketch, they experiment. They live knowledge through every sense available to them. That's why you can read the same Stoic line a dozen times and feel nothing until one quiet afternoon in a park when you see an old man gently feeding birds and suddenly the words awaken inside you. Stoicism isn't some dry, lifeless theory, as many assume. It's an art of living, a practice rooted in experience and the physical world. The Stoic doesn't just think inwardly. He engages outwardly. He sees with his eyes, listens with his ears, uses his body, and treats the world around him as a training ground for the mind. Your senses are extensions of your soul. The more clearly you use them, the sharper and more alive your experience of life becomes. Picture your mind as a canvas. Each sense is a different color of ink. The more colors you use, the richer and more vivid your painting of reality becomes. But rely on only one color-cold logic, and no matter how much you draw, your world remains flat and monochrome. What you don't feel with the body, you will struggle to truly understand with the mind. Among the 5 senses, sight is the one most celebrated. Leonardo da Vinci once said vision is the fastest path to truth. But vision isn't just about seeing, it's about perceiving. And that subtle difference marks the line between merely existing and truly living. You may walk the same alley every morning, yet have you ever truly noticed the way the light shifts on a cracked wall? The subtle change in the stride of the lottery. Ticket seller you pass each day? Or are you simply moving through life on autopilot, your eyes open but your mind asleep? Observation is not automatic, it's a skill. And like every skill, it requires practice. One of the most powerful ways to sharpen it is through drawing. To many adults, this sounds childish, even silly. But drawing forces you to look harder than you usually do. You begin to study form, light, shadow, and movement. Sketch a tree, and you'll quickly discover it isn't just green. It's alive with a spectrum: deep green, silvery tones, fading yellow, streaks of brown hiding in its bark. Complexity appears where once you saw simplicity. Draw a human face, and you're forced to confront not just features, but emotions. Sadness tucked into the corner of an eye, hope faintly lifted in a mouth's curve, silent loneliness written in the tilt of a brow. Drawing isn't about becoming an artist, it's about becoming fully human, training yourself to see. Hearing works the same way. When someone speaks, what do you listen for? Only their words, or the pauses between them? The hesitation before "I'm fine," the trembling in a voice that betrays hidden pain, the silence that lingers after a sentence, carrying more weight than the words themselves. A skilled listener doesn't just hear, they sense what's unsaid. In today's noisy world, true, listeners are rare, but this ability can be rebuilt. Turn off the artificial noise. Listen to the wind brushing past buildings, to the chatter of people nearby, and eventually to your own inner voice. The noise outside quiets, and suddenly awareness begins to awaken. Touch is another sense often neglected, yet it holds unique power. Hands-on actions, writing with a pen, arranging objects, cooking, sketching root knowledge in the real world. Here's a surprising truth. You learn better when your body moves. Write an idea by hand and it etches deeper into your nervous system. Touch an object and it creates emotional memory. Dry, abstract knowledge fades quickly. Physical experience stays. Even taste and smell, often dismissed as irrelevant to thought, can become anchors for wisdom. The warmth of your morning coffee can spark clarity, turning into a daily ritual of focus. A familiar scent can unlock buried memories or ignite fresh creativity. These seem like minor details, but for a mind seeking sharpness, no detail is too small. The truth most won't admit is this. Often, your lack of ideas has nothing to do with a lack of intelligence. It comes from a lack of feeling. Your mind disconnects from your body. You sit rigid, eyes glued to a screen, hands idle, music droning in the background, expecting inspiration to strike out of nowhere. But inspiration is nourished by the whole self. What you need is to move, walk, draw, touch, breathe, listen. A smart idea doesn't just come from the brain. It is nourished by the entire body. Picture this. An experienced investor and a casual observer both stare at the same collapsing market chart. The outsider sees only chaos and failure, but the investor perceives more. He feels the psychology of the crowd, senses cash flow beneath the panic, and spots the hidden opportunity. Same event, different perception. The difference isn't knowledge. It's sensitivity to reality. Ask yourself, am I truly living, or am I viewing life through a thick pane of glass? If that question stings, then your answer is clear. Time to reconnect with your senses. Don't live like a floating brain. Live like a whole person. See, hear, touch, smell, taste. When every sense is awake, you don't just grow smarter. You become fully present. And a present mind is a powerful one. If you need a place to start, try this today. Whatever concept you're learning, don't study it in the usual way. Instead, draw it by hand. Speak it aloud as if you're teaching it. Find a physical object that represents it and hold it. Listen to a piece of music that resonates with it. Let your whole self absorb the lesson. Pause. Allow the information to sink in through every sense. Suddenly, you'll notice that you don't just know it, you understand it. all real knowledge begins with perception. And perception only begins when you open every sensory door. Live as if each day were an unfinished painting, and with every glance, every sound, every touch, you are adding new colors to the canvas of your life. But even when your eyes are sharp, your ears tuned, and your senses alive, there will still be times when the world feels foggy like a landscape at dawn. You won't see the whole path ahead. That's the next real test. Can you keep walking forward even when clarity hasn't yet arrived? That is where intuition steps in. That is where courage rises. That is where the willingness to act becomes your guide. We all know the feeling. A hesitation before something new. A job offer outside your comfort zone. A bold idea you're afraid to say out loud. A class you've always wanted to take but never enrolled in. You pause. You delay. You make excuses. And in the back of your mind a voice whispers, "Not yet." But when exactly is yet? The truth is, we don't stall because we're unprepared. We stall because we're uncertain. We default to the familiar not because it's better, but because it's safer. That's how the brain survives, by clinging to what it already knows. But that instinct, that craving for certainty, is the very thing that keeps us still while life keeps moving. Daniel Kahneman, in Thinking, Fast and Slow, reminds us of a sobering truth. We are not as rational as we think. Our brains operate on two systems. One is fast, instinctive, and habit-driven. The other is slow, deliberate, and analytical. But the slow system demands energy, so the brain often defaults to the fast one. That system loves routine, loves patterns, loves predictability. And so, when we stand at the edge of something new, it flashes warning signals. This could go wrong. Uncertainty, it's rarely dangerous, yet our brain treats it like fire. The moment we can't predict the outcome, our instincts sound alarms. Unsafe, step back, stay put. But here's the paradox. What your instincts call a threat, your conscious mind could turn into a forge. Ambiguity isn't a fire to run from, it's heat that can shape you. The tragedy of modern life is this. We live in an age of endless opportunities, yet we behave as if we're under constant threat. The more options we have, the more we hesitate. The more advice we receive, the more paralyzed we become. And here's the harsh truth. Most dreams don't die in rejection. They die quietly in hesitation. The Stoics understood this long before psychology gave it names. Marcus Aurelius never asked for clarity in outcomes. He asked only for clarity in action. In his private reflections, he wasn't writing to inspire millions. He was reminding himself to stay awake mentally, morally, spiritually, through the chaos of war, pressure, and responsibility. He repeated one lesson to himself daily. You cannot control results, only your effort, your focus, your discipline. If the Emperor of Rome lived by this, why do we demand guarantees for even the smallest decisions in our own lives? Think of how we move through the world. We'll work tirelessly on something familiar, refining a safe resume for a job we don't even want, yet never send an application for the one we secretly dream of. Students will spend sleepless nights chasing an A in subjects they don't believe in, but never stop to ask the simple question, do I even care about what I'm learning? It isn't failure we fear, it's unpredictability. And that's where most lives quietly stall. I remember the moment it all clicked for me. I realized I was living by a script that wasn't mine. The way I studied, the jobs I took, the words I spoke, it was all driven by comfort and conformity. One chose a major because it was practical. I took side gigs because someone recommended. Then I read what everyone else was reading. It looked like striving, but inside I felt hollow. I was moving, but I wasn't alive. Then came the shift. I asked myself, what if none of these choices are truly mine? That single question cracked the walls of autopilot. Quietly, cautiously, I started making different choices. I signed up for classes outside my track. I explored side projects that made no sense on paper. I shared raw, unpolished ideas instead of waiting until they were perfect. I started saying no to networking events that drained me, and I don't know in conversations where I used to fake certainty. None of it felt safe. None of it felt strategic. But for the first time, I felt present in my own life. The outcomes didn't change overnight, but my posture toward uncertainty did. Each time I acted without guarantees, I was teaching my mind a new lesson. I choose. And that, as every Stoic would agree, is the deepest form of power. No one can take away your ability to choose how you respond. No one can control your mind unless you hand them the keys. So how do you train this? How do you avoid slipping back into hesitation and autopilot? You train courage, not confidence. Confidence waits until you feel ready. Courage acts before readiness arrives. And you start small. Speak up when you'd normally stay silent. Ask the question you're afraid sounds stupid. Try something you know you'll be bad at. Replace "I'm not ready" with "I'll try." Every time you act without certainty, you forge resilience. You stretch your range. You prove to yourself that you can live without guarantees. This is what Stoics called true discipline. Not withdrawal from life, but deeper engagement. Not escape, but transformation. And as I leaned into uncertainty, I realized something extraordinary. Creativity itself is built on certainty. Innovation doesn't come from knowing more. It comes from daring to do what hasn't been done by you. So, I stopped copying other people's study techniques and began creating my own. I studied backward, teaching others as a way to teach myself. I wrote notes framed around questions and controversies instead of tidy summaries. It was unorthodox, it was messy. But slowly clarity emerged. Not because I had the answers, but because I trusted the process. And here's the unexpected part. The more I embraced uncertainty, the more opportunities seemed to find me. Not by luck, but because the world notices people who are in motion. Movement itself attracts possibility. Over time, I uncovered something deeper. When you stop demanding certainty, you start discovering clarity. You may not know what will happen, but you know who you are. You know what you value. You know what you're willing to fight for. The world doesn't calm down, but inside steel is being forged. You don't need control over everything. You only need control over yourself. And in a frantic world, that's enough to carry you further than most ever dare to go. So let me ask you, is the thing you're avoiding because you're not sure it will work worth losing a piece of yourself over? If the answer is no, then don't wait for perfect timing. Don't wait for the fear to vanish. It never will. Instead, carry the fear with you. Make it part of the journey. Because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing to act. in its presence. And once you understand that, you're ready for the next step, not just acting with courage, but thinking with your whole mind, the Stoic way. Because intelligence isn't built by using fragments of yourself. It's built when instinct and analysis, reason and intuition all work together in harmony. No one becomes a genius by clinging to certainty. They become one by learning how to live and think fully, even in the unknown. Balance, at least the way most people talk about it, is an illusion. We imagine intelligence as neat compartments, logic in the morning, emotions in the evening, creativity reserved for weekends. But great minds don't live like that. They let their thoughts collide, mix, and cross-pollinate. Out of that messy harmony emerge ideas with the precision of science and the soul of art. Yet, somewhere along the way, usually in school, we get trapped inside rigid molds. You're told you're either a math person or an art person, left-brained or right-brained, analytical or emotional. But think honestly, have you ever met someone truly brilliant who operated with only half their mind? The best problem solvers are often deeply empathetic. The most creative people usually have sharp reasoning. Human intelligence doesn't flourish in halves, it flourishes in wholeness. The Stoics understood this long before neuroscience. They didn't care if you could recite passages of philosophy. They cared how you lived. They saw philosophy not as a subject to memorize, but as a way of moving through confusion, chaos, and uncertainty. And for that, logic alone wasn't enough. You needed intuition. You needed the quiet sense that could see beneath appearances, grasp the shape of a problem before there were even enough facts to analyze. That's what whole brain thinking is. Integrated, fluid, unsegmented. Look at Leonardo da Vinci. He didn't just paint. He didn't just invent. He was what happens when both hemispheres of the brain stop fighting and start collaborating. His sketch of a fetus in the womb wasn't just art, it was a scientific diagram of breathtaking accuracy. His concept for a helicopter didn't begin with equations. It began with bird wings in motion. He thought in networks, not straight lines. Einstein worked the same way. Before the equations came the image, a 16-year-old boy staring out a train window, wondering what would happen if light could bend. That moment of imagination birthed one of the most profound scientific revolutions of all time. Without imagination, relativity would never exist. Without logic, it would have remained only a dream. Even today, the most innovative leaders think more like musicians than technicians. They don't just follow data, they tune into rhythm. They loop a song not because it's their favorite, but because it creates flow. Music guides the intuitive brain while logic works in the background. It's not a formal technique. It's harmony, cognitive harmony. You can cultivate this yourself. You don't need to be Einstein or Da Vinci. You just need to change the way you think. Don't start a plan with a spreadsheet sketch, a mind map first. Don't take notes. In straight lines, turn them into visuals. Don't just analyze a problem first. Picture it, feel it, imagine the outcome. Then reverse engineer it step by step. Mind maps are one of the simplest tools. Few realize that Leonardo was drawing them centuries before Tony Buzan gave them a name. His notebooks are alive with circles, arrows, symbols, diagrams, all weaving thought into networks instead of rows. That's how a free mind works. And It's a skill you can reclaim. So next time you're stuck, don't type draw. Don't outline sketch. Grab a sheet of paper. Write down the mess in your head. Connect the dots with arrows. Add colors, symbols, doodles. Don't worry if it looks chaotic. That's the point. Your brain will notice. Suddenly it's not just working, it's playing. And in play, you unlock thoughts you've never had before. Try this experiment. The next time your mind feels exhausted or uninspired, don't push harder. Step away. Take a walk. Imagine a picture. Draw it when you return, not for art, but for activation. Then notice how your thoughts reorganize. There's no magic here. You've simply turned your whole brain on. Whole brain thinking isn't a hack. It isn't a fad. It's a way of life. It's what happens when you stop cutting yourself into compartments, work versus feeling, logic versus creativity, and start living as a whole person. When you do this, not only does your thinking sharpen, but your life feels richer, more vivid, more real. But here's the catch. None of this is possible without energy. A tired body cannot power an awakened mind. You can't unlock creativity when you're running on 4 hours of sleep and caffeine fumes. You can't sustain sharpness on a diet of fast food and stress. The Stoics knew this. Seneca himself warned that the body must be disciplined, not for vanity, but so it doesn't betray the mind. So the next lesson isn't about the mind at all, it's about the vessel that carries it, your body, because a sharp mind cannot live in a sluggish frame. You cannot expect to think clearly if your breakfast is nothing but coffee, sugar, and stress. The mind is not separate from the body. It is carried within it, fueled by it, limited or liberated by it. That's why the next chapter isn't merely about health. It's about the foundation of every decision, every thought, every act of clarity you will ever have. When most people think of Stoicism, they imagine men with long beards sitting still in silent reflection, weathering storms of emotion with sheer reason. Rarely do they picture sweat, muscle, or food. Yet Leonardo da Vinci, who embodied much of the Stoic ideal, showed us that the complete human isn't only sharp of mind, it is balanced, strong, and disciplined in body. Goethe described him not just as a genius, but as a model of wholeness, as fit and agile as an athlete, yet as profound as a philosopher. That wasn't a coincidence. Da Vinci understood that you cannot sustain sharp thought in a neglected vessel. Think about it. When you're sick, your patience disappears. When you're sleep deprived, even the simplest decisions feel heavy. When your body is overfed with sugar or dulled with alcohol, your mind follows. The Stoics were clear: you must care for the vessel if you expect the voyage to go well. No philosopher could rise above pain, fatigue, or hunger if they constantly abused their body. And yet, today, we live backwards. We buy books on personal growth, pay for seminars, and binge motivational videos, but still stay up past midnight scrolling. We invest in courses to sharpen our future while treating our bodies with the cheapest fuel. We act like our mind is sacred, but treat the body that carries it like it doesn't matter. Does that make sense? To the Stoics, philosophy wasn't theory. It was daily practice. They noticed imbalances, adjusted, and lived in rhythm with nature. They didn't wait for illness, they lived so they wouldn't need doctors. I remember when I used to drink soda every single day, I told myself it was nothing, just a small indulgence. But then I noticed, after every fast food meal, my mind would fog, my motivation collapsed, and my patience shrank. It wasn't coincidence. Food wasn't just feeding my body, it was steering my mind. I cut the junk, added raw grains, fewer heavy proteins, more water. Not because it was trendy, but because I wanted a sharper blade for my daily battles. Ask yourself now, is your body a tool you can rely on or a burden you drag along? Are you steering it, or is it quietly steering you toward fatigue, irritation, and fog? Stoicism doesn't demand extremes. It doesn't demand you starve or obsess over appearances. What it demands is balance, and balance, paradoxically, only comes through discipline. Health isn't in prescriptions. It's in habits. Your daily rhythm is your best doctor. How you eat, how you move, how you rest, that's philosophy and practice. Strength matters, yes, but flexibility matters more. Bruce Lee, though not a Stoic, embodied the same principle. He didn't just strike with power, he moved with fluidity, adapting like water. In life, rigidity breaks you. Flexibility saves you. I learned this when I began practicing yoga, not to become a monk, but because my body had become stiff, my back hunched, my mind tight. One session released what hours of overthinking could not. The body remembers what the mind tries to ignore. Meditation works the same way, not as a mystical ritual, but as a reset. I don't meditate to escape the world. I meditate to notice my heartbeat, my shallow breath, the tension in my jaw. That small pause is often the difference between snapping in anger and staying calm. And sleep. Don't romanticize sleeplessness. You can eat the cleanest diet, exercise daily, drink green smoothies, but if you live on 4 hours of restless sleep, you're undoing all of it. Sleep is when the body repairs and the brain rewires. Skip it long enough, and no philosophy, no productivity trick, no caffeine will save you. So what does this mean in practice? Nothing complicated. No extreme diets, no brutal regimens. Just this: cut out processed sugar and fried oils. Eat slowly, and notice how food makes you feel. Sleep at least 7 hours. Power down screens an hour before bed. Walk outside for 30 minutes every day. Practice something that awakens your body. Yoga, martial arts, dance, swimming. And once in a while, simply sit in silence and ask, what is my body telling me? These aren't chores, they're declarations of self-respect. And once you start to feel the difference, lighter thoughts, steadier moods, deeper patience, you won't want to go back. You'll lose the taste for what weakens you, not because of rules, but because your body has tasted clarity. Remember this: you cannot think sharply if your foundation is collapsing. You cannot live wisely if you don't live well. And you cannot live well if you keep ignoring the little signals your body sends. Pause. Close your eyes for a moment. Feel your breath, your heartbeat. This is the only body you'll have for the rest of your life. Treat it as the vessel of wisdom it was meant to be. Every emotion, every idea, every dream you will ever process must first pass through this body. So why let it collapse from neglect? Care for your body like a warrior preparing for battle, because the truth is, you are in a battle, not against other people, but between a vibrant, intentional life and a slow, quiet decay. And once you begin treating your body as the foundation of a sharp mind, something bigger clicks into place. You realize that nothing in life is truly separate. The way you eat shapes how you think. The way you move reflects how you make decisions. The way you rest determines how deeply you feel. Everything physical, mental, emotional, spiritual is woven into one system. Seeing this interconnectedness is the doorway to a new way of thinking, one where nothing is random and everything connects. Leonardo da Vinci embodied this. He had the strange ability to connect what looked unrelated: seashells and mountain ranges, cathedral domes and strands of hair. To most people, this was wild imagination. To him, it was intuition. Many of the ideas he once scribbled in notebooks, dismissed in his time, later became foundations of modern science. When Da Vinci found seashells on mountain tops and suggested they once lay beneath the sea, he wasn't just seeing objects, he was seeing hidden patterns beneath the surface. We tend to glorify geniuses as people who know more. In reality, they aren't defined by how much information they collect, but by how deeply they connect the dots. They don't have more brain cells than you. They simply have more neural links built through curiosity, practice, and the habit of asking, what else could this be connected to? That question is the starting point of sharper thought. Stoic philosophy teaches the same principle. Living wisely doesn't mean living minimally. It means living deliberately. You don't need to know everything. You need to understand how the pieces you already have fit together. Marcus Aurelius wasn't a physicist or a physician, yet his private reflections are still quoted in psychiatry, leadership, and politics. Why? Because he thought in principles, not fragments. And principles can be repurposed across every field, like Lego blocks rearranged to build endless new structures. So how do you cultivate this kind of thinking? Imagine the T-shaped model. The horizontal bar is breadth, learning a little about a lot. The vertical bar is depth, going deeply into one field you love. People with only breadth skim the surface, floating from one shiny idea to another without depth. People with only depth dig so far down one, well, they mistake it for the whole world. But T-shaped thinkers, they combine both. They go deep in one area while reaching wide across others. That's how Michael Jordan could dominate both offense and defense when most players specialized. That's how Michael Schumacher wasn't just a driver, he helped design the very car he raced. They didn't confine themselves to a role. They saw the system, the connections, and elevated everything around them. That is intelligence without limits. You don't need to be famous to live this way. You can practice every day. Start with silly questions. What's the similarity between anger and a pressure cooker? How is my procrastination like a child avoiding homework? These aren't jokes. They are sparks. Each question forces your brain to link patterns instead of drowning in repetition. This is where meditation also shows its hidden value, not just as a way to calm down, but as training and connection. You notice, I get angry, my breath quickens, my stomach knots, my shoulders tighten. Emotion, body, thought woven into one system. Seeing that link allows you to step back. You stop reacting blindly. You begin to respond deliberately. That's why Stoics didn't run from emotions. They studied them. They traced their patterns. They asked, what's really happening inside me? They practiced awareness until choice replaced impulse. And this applies everywhere. Think of a stranger you met once who left you feeling refreshed after a short conversation. They didn't solve your problems, but they connected you to a new perspective, and suddenly your brain felt updated. That's why you should seek people unlike you, different backgrounds, values, and beliefs. They are the software updates you can't download alone. Sharp thinking isn't about having instant answers. It's about asking sharper questions. The right question opens doors. The wrong one keeps you locked in a maze. Someone unemployed might ask, "Why won't anyone hire me?" Another asks, "What skills can I combine to create new value?" Same situation, two different questions, two completely different futures. The Stoics called this the art of perception. They didn't teach people to run from problems. They taught them to redefine problems into lessons. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The mind adapts and converts to its purposes the obstacle to our acting." The obstacle itself can become the path, but only if you see the connection dot. So train this habit. When frustration hits, don't rush past it. Ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" Or, "What does this remind me of that I've already survived?" That single question is the first spark of connection. And here's the truth. Life will keep circling you back to the same obstacles until you learn what you need to learn. Failures will repeat, patterns will echo, challenges will return until you see the link beneath them. That's when you stop living reactively and begin living intelligently. The paradox is this: the deeper you understand one thing, the easier it becomes to understand another. Because you're no longer memorizing facts, you're seeing principles. And principles are universal. You're not starting from nothing. You're starting with tested principles. That's why a chef might become a better leader than a business graduate. Why a poet can transform into a brilliant copywriter. Why someone who has endured depression can help others through their darkest moments more effectively than a textbook ever could. If you've ever felt not special, perhaps it isn't a lack of talent, it's that you haven't tried connecting what you already know in new ways. Think of it like having a pile of beautiful Lego bricks but never daring to build something out of them. The moment you start combining what looks unrelated, writing and public speaking, psychology and engineering, marketing and meditation, you realize intelligence isn't about raw information. It's about synthesis. True intelligence is the habit of connection, and that habit starts with a conscious decision. Never let an experience pass without learning something from it. When you look at a seashell and connect it to the shape of a mountain, you're practicing real intelligence. When you take today's emotions, anger, regret, or hope and imagine tomorrow's lesson in them, you're living like a philosopher. Because once you learn to link objects, people, feelings, and choices into one living system, you stop reacting blindly. You begin creating deliberately. You reshape reality, not by force, but by perception. From that place, even adversity itself becomes training a forge that sharpens your will and toughens your character. There's something paradoxical about hardship. We usually only recognize its value after we've survived it. In the middle of it, all we feel is chaos. A career collapses, a relationship ends, health falters, and instinctively we ask, "Why me?" We grieve, we rage, we deny. But what if, In the very moment of struggle, we could flip our perspective. What if every challenge were not punishment, but preparation? Epictetus captured this perfectly. Difficulties show a person's character. So when trouble comes, think of yourself as a wrestler whom God, like a trainer, has paired with a strong opponent, not to crush you, but to prepare you. Adversity, then, is not a verdict against you. It's a custom-built training session. Imagine a day where everything goes wrong. You wake to a flat tire, your boss unfairly scolds you, you're caught in the rain, and at home you end the day with an argument. Normally that day feels wasted, miserable. But what if you stopped in the middle of it and asked, if this were training, what skill is life testing me on right now? Patience, self-control, optimism in discomfort? Instantly, the frame shifts. You're no longer a victim of the day. You're an athlete in training. Here's a common misconception. Smart and successful people are those who avoid problems best. In reality, it's usually the opposite. The people who become strongest are those who face problems head-on again and again. Like muscles under resistance, the mind requires friction to grow. Without it, you don't get wisdom. You get fragility. Ask yourself honestly, if you had never struggled, would you truly know your limits? Would you know your power? The truth is, training opportunities are everywhere, but most people miss them because their reflex is to label challenges as nuisances, injustices, or personal attacks. A client lashes out, and we see only insult. A colleague slacks off, and we feel only anger. A loved one disappoints us, and we interpret it as betrayal. But behind each of these is a hidden gym session. The angry client is patience practice. The careless coworker is leadership training. The disappointment is a lesson in separating love from expectation. But you only see those lessons if you ask better questions. If you choose a wiser posture, I have a friend who spent 3 years building a community cafe with everything he had. When the pandemic hit, sales collapsed, staff quit, and he shut it down. Heartbroken, he could have sunk into bitterness. Instead, he studied every mistake: cash flow, hiring, risk management, leadership. 2 years later, he came back not with one cafe, but with a franchise system. Stronger, wiser, more humble. He wasn't lucky or gifted. He simply treated failure as his mentor instead of his enemy. So how do you bring this Stoic principle into your everyday life? Use a simple 3-step practice. Recognize the challenge, name the lesson, act like you're in training. If someone's negativity irritates you, whisper to yourself, patience practice. When work feels overwhelming, think stamina training. In progress. When you're embarrassed by your own mistake, tell yourself, lesson and humility, let's go. These small reframes are powerful. They shift your posture from defense to readiness. You stop waiting for life to be easy and start using life to become better. Picture yourself as a blacksmith. Every challenge is the fire and the hammer. If you run from the heat and the blows, the metal of your mind stays soft. But if you stay with it, endure the fire, and face the hammer, your character hardens into something unbreakable. But if you embrace the forge, you don't become hardened, just for the sake of endurance. You become a blade not for war, but for clarity. Not to cut others down, but to cut through your own confusion. Some people hear this and think, so am I supposed to just tolerate everything? Is this glorified suffering? Absolutely not. Stoicism isn't about passivity. It's about deliberate choice. When you can't change the world, you train your response. And when you can change it, you act not from panic, not from rage, but from a place of clarity. That's the difference. Either way, you're not being controlled by life. You're in control of yourself. And something remarkable happens once you start seeing adversity as training. The fear of hardship begins to fade. Instead of avoiding discomfort, you lean toward it. Instead of clinging to comfort, you begin seeking growth. You stretch into unfamiliar territory. You evolve. Just like the soreness after a good workout, discomfort itself becomes a signal of progress. You learn the timeless truth. The only way to sharpen the mind is to use it under pressure, not to run from it. Eventually, you stop labeling people or events as problems. They become raw material. The difficult coworker is a chance to practice patience. The rejection letter is an opportunity to strengthen resilience. The delay at the airport is a test of tolerance. You stop seeing obstacles as blocks and start seeing them as weights in your mental gym, like a seasoned athlete reading the terrain before a race. You begin to read emotions, impulses, and triggers with calm precision, not to suppress them, but to respond with intention. This is what a trained mind looks like: steady in the storm, flexible in uncertainty, and capable of pausing between stimulus and response. Take a moment now. Think of 3 recent situations that upset or frustrated you. Maybe it was something small: a rude comment online, an unexpected bill, a tense conversation. What if each one was a disguised lesson? What skill were they training? Patience, perspective, self-control? That reframing alone shifts your posture from victimhood to mastery. Because the people who grow fastest are not those who avoid pain. They're the ones who integrate it. They treat life not as a minefield to tiptoe through, but as a training ground where every challenge is a drill. They look at difficulty in the eye and say, "Good, this is where I get stronger." And here's the real gift. Once you build this lens, you stop hungering for shallow fixes, quick hacks, motivational sound bites, or surface-level positivity. You begin craving depth. You want wisdom, not slogans. You want strategies and tools that endure. And for that, there is no better source than books. But not just any books, the right books. The kind that cut through your excuses and demand real change. The ones that speak directly to the part of you that's still hungry for growth. Because here's the harsh truth. Most of us aren't really learning. We're just consuming. You watch a 10-minute self-help video and call it personal growth. You skim a few LinkedIn posts and think you suddenly understand human nature. You listen to a dozen podcasts while multitasking, speed read a bestseller, and maybe quote Marcus Aurelius at dinner. But if I ask, have you lived differently this week? Have you made a wiser choice because of what you learned? Can you point to a concrete example where you applied it? You'd probably hesitate. That hesitation is the problem. We've confused consuming information with transformation. You're not starving for knowledge, you're overfed. The problem is you're not digesting it. It's like snacking all day and wondering why your health isn't improving. You stuff your mind with bits of knowledge, but never pause to reflect, question, or apply. That isn't learning. That's entertainment disguised as self-growth. The Stoics never read that way. They didn't turn to books to feel clever or to have better quotes on their lips. They read to live better. For them, every sentence was a mirror. Where am I drifting? What needs to change? And how do I change now? Reading that doesn't alter your behavior isn't growth. It's just another performance of the ego. Epictetus didn't write to make you nod along. He wrote to make you uncomfortable. His words were scalpels, not pillows. They were meant to cut through illusion, not cushion you from it. In our age of endless scrolling, deep reading has become a form of rebellion against distraction, against shallow comfort, against self-deception. If you want real wisdom, you must reject the habit of reading for entertainment and start reading for transformation. And here's how you know you're reading the right way. The book doesn't soothe you, it unsettles you. It drags you out of your mental comfort zone. It makes you rethink your assumptions. If a book isn't changing you, then you're not truly reading, you're collecting words. Don't congratulate yourself for quoting, "Control what you can control," if you're still obsessing over people's opinions. Don't applaud yourself for loving the phrase, "Virtue is the only good," if you've never turned down an easy advantage because it wasn't the right thing to do. Knowledge without action isn't power. It's dead weight. The difference between living smarter and living stuck often comes down to this. Do you treat books as decoration or as training? If you want to think sharply, you need a sharper filter for what and how you read. Not what's trending on bestseller lists. Not which book has the flashiest quotes, but whether a book calls you out on how you actually live. That's the only standard that matters. If it does, read it. Read like you're on trial with yourself, as the defendant and the book as the evidence. Let it expose the small habits you've excused, the mental laziness you've normalized, the ways you've quietly sabotaged yourself. It doesn't matter how many books you've finished. It matters how many you've digested. Marcus Aurelius's Meditations is short, but a single passage could feed a year of deep reflection. Ryan Holiday's stillness is the key isn't meant to be rushed through like a checklist. It's meant to sit with you in silence until you can actually be still. If you're ready for sharper truths, pick up David Brooks' The Road to Character. It won't flatter you. It'll confront the moral ego you've been hiding behind. Or Holiday's Ego is the Enemy, a book that sounds simple, but requires you to give up the praise you secretly crave. Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money will challenge you not to get rich, but to stop acting like a child when it comes to money. Still baffled by why you make poor decisions even when you know better? Read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking. Fast and slow, it's not just behavioral psychology, it's a mirror reflecting the messy, inconsistent patterns of your own thinking. You'll see yourself in its pages, and if you're willing, you'll start seeing how to be different. If your struggle is focus, Cal Newport's deep work is a necessary slap in a distracted world. It's a reminder that you'll never create anything meaningful if you can't go more than 10 minutes without checking a screen. And if you're tired of self-help fluff, James Clear's Atomic Habits is the antidote. It gives you a system, not just motivation. Small steps repeated daily that reshape your life from the inside out. Reading the Stoic way isn't about expanding your worldview endlessly. It's about refining it, cutting away noise, restructuring the way you think. And that doesn't happen when you bounce from one shiny book to the next like an inspiration addict. Pick one, go deep, take notes, argue with it, apply it, fail, adjust, repeat. Here's a brutally effective method. Take one sentence from a book and flip it on its head. If you read anger is weakness, then write anger is strength when, not because you want to dismiss the idea, but because you want to own it. Nothing forces understanding like arguing both sides. And if you want to carve it even deeper, explain what you've learned to someone else. Not to preach, not to show off, but to test your understanding. Truly sharp minds aren't those that remember the most. They're those that can explain the complex in simple terms. If you can't do that, you don't own it yet. Stop congratulating yourself for finishing books or binging podcasts. That's performative productivity. Learning isn't about accumulation, it's about integration. It's not a trophy you show the world, but an honest conversation between you and yourself. That's why the Stoics insisted we learn not for school, but for life. It's not about reading more. It's about living differently, sharper, clearer, less reactive, more intentional. Knowledge that doesn't translate into action is a luxury you don't have time for. So pick a book that hurts a little, one that unsettles your assumptions, one that makes you rethink the way you live. Read slowly, rewrite its ideas in your own words. Ask harder questions than the author ever asked you. Then test them in the mess of your daily life. Talk about them with others. Notice what breaks, what holds, what changes. That cycle: read, reflect, test, fail, refine is sharper than any tool you're chasing. And once you practice it, you'll notice something unexpected. You'll stop craving more noise. You'll start craving stillness. Not isolation, not awkward silence, but intentional quiet, the kind where your own thoughts finally catch up with you. This is the next lesson. A skill no school will ever teach you, but without it you'll drift through life like someone always busy, yet always late to their own story. It's the art of stopping deliberately. It sounds simple, but to pause not from exhaustion, not from collapse, but from choice to stop, to observe, to exist with clarity. That's strength of the rarest kind. The wise don't fill every silence. Their pauses often say more than their words ever could. In a world obsessed with advice, deadlines, goals, and constant output, intentional stillness has become a luxury. And because it's rare, it's priceless. Most people only slow down when they're forced after burnout, rejection, or crisis. The Stoics did the opposite. They chose silence before life demanded it. Not because they lacked words, but because they knew listening reveals more than speaking. Picture this. You're in a heated meeting, voices clashing, emotions spiking. You don't jump in. You breathe. You wait. You stay silent for 3 whole minutes, and then you speak, and the room goes still. Not because of your status, but because you've learned the power of silence. That's the next evolution of sharp thinking, choosing when not to act, so that when you do, it matters. Intentional. Stillness isn't about incense, meditation mats, or monastery walls. It can be found in the ordinary, washing dishes, waiting at a red light, staring at your own reflection in the morning mirror. It's not about time or place, it's about presence. Are you living your life, or are you merely acting in a script someone else has written for you? Who's setting the pace, your own mind or the expectations of the crowd? A friend once admitted, "I can't stand silence. I need a podcast while I cook, music while I study, YouTube while I eat." He thought he feared silence. In truth, what he feared was himself, the questions he had buried, the emotions he had avoided for years. Silence is where those voices return. Silence is where the truth you've ignored finally speaks. And here lies a paradox. The more we chase intelligence, the more shallow we risk becoming. We devour books, courses, hacks, information like overeating a meal without ever tasting it. But wisdom, like steel, requires more than heat and hammering. It requires cooling, rest, stillness. Without pauses, knowledge becomes noise. I once attended a workshop led by a successful entrepreneur. He said something that made the whole room laugh until it sunk in. If you don't have at least 3 hours of total silence each week just to think, you're living like a robot. In a culture that worships multitasking, that sounded absurd. But then he added, the one who slows down enough to think deeply will always outpace those who are too busy to think at all. Suddenly the laughter stopped. Stillness is not emptiness. It's where clarity gathers. It's where you can ask, is what I'm doing truly important? Or am I just busy? Does this align with who I want to be? Or am I moving out of habit? These are not questions answered in Zoom calls, scrolling feeds, or crowded to-do lists. They rise only when you're quiet enough to listen inward. Try this. Before making a big decision, quitting a job, ending a relationship, investing money, don't Google it. Don't ask your friends. Don't poll social media. Sit in silence and ask yourself, do I truly need this? What happens if I don't? And if I do, can I live with the consequences? You'll be surprised at how silence sharpens honesty, more than any external advice ever could. Don't confuse stillness with isolation. In fact, those who master silence are often the ones who connect most deeply when they return to others. They don't speak to fill air. They speak to contribute. Meaning, they don't need noise to prove they exist. Their calm is their presence, and presence earns respect. A practice. Once a week, set aside 2 hours with no devices, no chatter, no obligations. Walk alone, journal, watch the rain fall. At first you'll feel restless, as if you're wasting time, but give it patience. Slowly, what matters most will rise like clear water after a storm. And in that reflection, you'll find not the polished persona you've built for others, but your raw, real self-contradictions and all, messy, honest, and alive. Stillness isn't weakness. It's awareness. It gives you the rarest of powers, the space between stimulus and response. The longer that space, the more choices you have. And choice is the deepest freedom humans possess. Pause here, right now. 10 seconds. No phone, no music, just silence. Listen closely. What you hear is not emptiness, it's truth, the voice. You've buried under constant noise, but silence alone isn't enough. A blade, no matter how sharp, is still ornamental until it's tested by fire. Stillness gives you depth, but adversity reveals your strength. And so the Stoic asks, will you stay forever in calm waters, or will you step into the waves that shape who you truly are? Here's the overlooked truth. Most of what we call wisdom is just reflexes trained in familiar environments. You're articulate in conversations you've had 100 times. You're decisive when problems follow predictable patterns. You're efficient when the terrain never changes. That's not depth. That's a fish mastering its pond. The true test isn't speed in calm water. It's how you adapt when thrown into the open ocean. Yet, like every living creature, we crave comfort. We stay where it's safe. The brain prefers routine, conserving energy by avoiding surprises. But this instinct, left unchecked, kills adaptability, dulls resilience, and quietly suffocates our potential. The tragedy? It feels fine. Comfort disguises itself as peace, but it's really stagnation. You won't notice until life slaps you hard. And then you'll wonder why you feel unprepared. If you want a sharper mind, you can't just consume knowledge from books and podcasts. You must step into discomfort, not recklessly, but deliberately. Not to create drama, but to forge resilience. You must place yourself in situations that unsettle you, challenge your habits, and force you to rethink yourself from the ground up. That is the next lesson. The challenge doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't need to move to another country or quit your job tomorrow. Growth can start with smaller battles, the ones that sting your pride and unsettle your ego. It might mean joining a team where you're the least experienced, learning a skill you once dismissed as not for you, starting a hard conversation with your boss, your parents, or even yourself in the mirror. It could mean asking for brutally honest feedback from the very people you usually avoid confronting. Those moments won't feel glamorous. They will feel uncomfortable, raw, even humiliating at times. But that's precisely where the old mental grooves begin to break and new neural pathways start to form. That's not just learning, it's intelligence waking up from autopilot. How do you know you're lacking challenge? Look at the texture of your days. Do they feel too easy? You live in total control, unbothered, untested, unshaken? If no one questions you, if nothing scares you, if life feels fine but uninspiring, that's not peace, that's stagnation. That's evolution stalled. Sometimes one small, high-impact move is all it takes. Change your environment. Go work in a place where you know no one. The unfamiliar air makes your brain more alert, forces you to observe, to notice, or throw yourself into a task that makes you start from zero. If you're a writer, learn design. If you're an introvert, practice public speaking. The point isn't to become a designer or a speaker. The real lesson is in watching how your mind responds when it has no familiar foothold. That's where sharp thinking is forged. Perhaps the most powerful challenge of all, engaging deeply with people who hold beliefs opposite to yours. Not to win an argument, but to understand. Why do they see the world so differently? Why do they respond in ways that clash with everything you assume is normal? Talking with opposing values is like standing in front of a mirror under new light. Suddenly you notice shadows you've never seen before, cracks you've long ignored. You don't need to agree with them, but by facing those perspectives, you force your logic to evolve or your beliefs to strengthen. That's mental clarity at work. And let's not forget the hardest challenges aren't always external. Sometimes they're the questions you've avoided asking yourself. Have you ever asked your boss where you're falling short? Or asked, A close friend, what traits of yours quietly exhaust others? Have you ever examined the life assumptions you've clung to for decades? These are uncomfortable questions, but they shift your inner world from comfortable to cutting edge. Stay in. Challenge long enough, and something remarkable happens. Your brain stops fleeing. It starts adapting. You stop fearing the unknown and begin getting curious. You stop avoiding people who are better than you and start seeking them out. You stop worrying about being judged and start focusing on what you're learning. Intelligence stops being a shield and becomes a tool. Here's the paradox. The deeper you go into challenge, the calmer you become. Because difficulty is no longer the enemy, it becomes your ally. From that alliance, you gain something even greater than intelligence. You gain discernment. You start to tell the difference between challenges that sharpen you and distractions that only drain you. You stop being a victim of your environment and begin to architect it. So ask yourself honestly, in all your years, how often have you deliberately stepped into a space where you felt small? How often have you become a student again, not to be taught, but to confront the edges of what you think you know? If the answer is rarely, then maybe now is the time to stop chasing ease and start building an ecosystem sharp enough to wake you up every day. Here's one practice. Every month, reach out to someone you admire and ask a question. Not to network, not to impress, but to collide. Ask, if you were in my shoes, what would you do differently? Then brace yourself. The answers will expose blind spots you never saw. Challenge doesn't mean turning life into a battlefield. It means stepping into the fog, the uncertain, the unsafe, the unfamiliar. Because in that fog, your sharpest questions emerge. Whose standards am I living by? What am I truly afraid to lose? Are my limits real or just habits I've never tested? Face those questions in the fire of challenge, and your mind begins to light up. Not with degrees or prestige, but with clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes when you've broken enough times to know exactly who you are and what matters. When you've lived this way, you no longer need to escape when pressure comes. You've already designed pressure that sharpens you. Like a bladesmith forging steel, you've turned heat and hammer into resilience. At that point, clarity isn't a trophy, it's your default. You don't fear hard times anymore because you've already trained inside them. And when you step out of any challenging environment, you carry a new version of yourself, sharper, deeper, humbler. But that's not the finish line. That's just a launch pad. Because challenge without reflection is wasted fuel. The real growth comes not just from the fire, but from the mirror, from pausing long enough to see who you've become. Yet strangely, most people never look. They live like fugitives from themselves, immersed in routines, distractions, and goals, all outward, never inward. They can explain their job, their boss, their partner, even the stock market. But ask them, do you truly understand yourself? And they freeze. They freeze because understanding yourself means facing what you've buried. The flaws you've hidden, the pain you've ignored, the illusions you've built to mask your emptiness. Stoicism teaches us that real freedom only comes when you're willing to see yourself clearly, not through personality quizzes or motivational quotes, but through relentless, honest observation. There are no shortcuts, no external guide. You must walk into the labyrinth of your own mind without GPS. without a map, alone. But on the other side lies something greater than comfort, clarity. And clarity, once found, is the sharpest tool you'll ever carry. And here's the twist. It's in that darkness, the moments you'd rather avoid, that the sharpest form of intelligence begins to take shape. Among all the types of intelligence you can build languages, coding, music, strategy, inner intelligence is the hardest to cultivate, but also the most foundational. You can master external skills, but if you can't recognize when you're tired, arrogant, avoiding, or self-sabotaging, then all those skills become like jet engines strapped to a sinking ship. They'll move you faster, but only downward. Think back to the last time you made a bad decision, snapped at someone you cared about, or carried out an action you later regretted. The real issue wasn't the choice itself. It was which version of you made that choice. Was it the self desperate for attention, the self terrified of being left behind, the self blinded by overconfidence? If you can't name the version of yourself that made the decision, you're likely to repeat it again unconsciously. On autopilot. This is where self-criticism enters. But let's be clear, self-criticism is not self-punishment. It isn't standing over yourself with a whip. It's stepping outside yourself, like viewing your own life from the eyes of an impartial stranger. Someone who neither hates nor worships you. Someone radically honest who sees both your potential and your ego in the same frame and then asks the most piercing question, what are you afraid of? That one question, gentle as it sounds, can shatter the illusions you've lived under for years, because most of our poor decisions are rooted not in ignorance, but in unacknowledged fear. The Stoics warned of this constantly. To them, the greatest danger in life wasn't war, disease, or enemies. It was an unexamined mind. If you don't make reflection a habit, you're not really living. You're just reacting, driven by instincts, emotions, and social programming. Like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. And the cruelest part, you won't even realize it. I once believed I knew myself until I studied more deeply in behavioral psychology. The more I read, the more I realized how little I actually understood. Actions I thought were deliberate were really reflexes formed in childhood. Decisions I thought were rational turned out to be elaborate defense mechanisms. You think you're choosing a career out of passion? Maybe you're chasing the approval your parents never gave you. You think you left a relationship because it wasn't right? Maybe you were simply afraid of the vulnerability real love demands. Self-understanding begins the moment you stop taking your motives at face value and start questioning them. But here's the most crucial part. Self-criticism only works if it's paired with self-compassion. If you approach yourself like a judge, you'll hand down harsh sentences. But if you approach yourself like a craftsman, you'll repair. What you need is not guilt, it's clarity. True strength doesn't mean never messing up. It means not making the same mistake too many times. Yet many people fear self-criticism because they think it kills confidence. They cling to positivity, to shallow self-love. But loving yourself doesn't mean ignoring your flaws. In fact, unfiltered self-indulgence is the most unloving thing you can do to yourself. If you loved a child, you wouldn't let them eat candy all day just because they wanted to. You'd teach them boundaries, awareness, and discipline because you see their future. The same applies to you. If you truly love yourself, you won't shy away from brutal honesty. There's another essential key to reflection: feedback from others. You can't uncover all your blind spots alone. Sometimes the people around you act as mirrors, showing you truths you've missed. Of course, not all feedback is correct, but if three completely different people tell you the same thing, like, "You don't really listen," maybe it's time to pause and ask, "What am I missing?" Objectivity doesn't mean absorbing every opinion. It means filtering out what helps your growth and discarding the rest. A friend of mine once recorded himself during every presentation, then played it back with the cold detachment of a stranger. He wasn't doing it to admire himself, he was searching for patterns, hesitation, rambling, unnecessary filler. At first, I thought it was obsessive. Later, I realized it was one of the purest forms of intentional self-observation. You don't need to copy that exact practice, but everyone needs some method of stepping outside themselves, some way to catch their own habits in action. Because without that, you'll never see the strings that pull you. At this point, you might be thinking, "This feels heavy," and you'd be right. It is heavy because this is the one task no one can do for you, not a new skill, not an online course, not even a mentor. The real work begins and ends with you alone, unfiltered, willing to look at yourself honestly. It always comes back to this, the one conversation most people avoid. Not with friends, not with mentors, but with themselves. Sitting quietly, no phone, no background noise, no comforting distractions, just you with you. No sugarcoating, no dodging. Because a truly mature person isn't the one who collects the most resources or achievements, but the one who knows exactly where they stand, why they're there, and what it will take to move forward. So here's the real test. Can you sit alone with yourself, not scrolling, not filling the silence with a podcast, just facing the thoughts you've buried under work, entertainment, and even self-help rituals? The Stoics taught that the strongest person is the one who can be alone with their own mind and not be afraid of what surfaces. Because once you can face yourself, nothing else in life can shake you. But knowing yourself is only the beginning. Once the noise falls quiet, once you can hear your inner voice clearly, another question always rises. What will you live by? Not what goals you'll chase or what ambitions you'll stack, but what unshakable principles will anchor you when the world spins in chaos. And that's when the Stoic compass appears. Virtue. We live in an age obsessed with intelligence, AI, IQ scores, critical thinking models, data analysis, flawless presentations. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Knowing more doesn't mean living better. You can graduate with honors, lead meetings, analyze reports, and still lose your temper with your children. You can ace logic tests and still collapse when life places you in a moral gray zone. Real intelligence isn't about how fast you think, it's about where your thinking takes you. And in Stoicism, that direction has a name: virtue. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If at some point in your life you should come across anything better than justice, truth, self-control, and courage, it must be an extraordinary thing indeed." Most people skip over this line. It's not printed on mugs or blasted across Instagram feeds, but it is a compass, one that points to the only things that matter when everything else crumbles. Marcus didn't say choose success. He said, show me anything better than virtue. The challenge, of course, is that you won't. The Stoics defined 4 cardinal virtues: justice, wisdom, temperance, and courage. Think of them as 4 wheels carrying you through life's uncertainty. Lose one and your balance collapses. Together, they guide you like a compass through the jungle of human experience. Justice isn't just about courts and laws. It's about how you treat people when no one's watching. The tone you use with your subordinates. The way you stop to help someone when there's nothing in it for you. Saying no to an unethical shortcut, even if it could benefit you. Justice often requires courage, especially when you're the only one standing. Wisdom is the art of seeing clearly what's within your control and what isn't. The wise don't chase every headline or react to every rumor. They pause and ask, does this matter? What can I actually do here? Without wisdom, emotions toss you around like a leaf on a river. With wisdom, you steer the current instead of drowning in it. Temperance is self-control in a world addicted to excess. It's the discipline to stop before anger takes over, the humility to decline empty praise, the awareness to say no when indulgence would betray your values. Temperance doesn't make you dull, it makes you dependable, someone others can trust. And courage, the hardest virtue of all, isn't about being fearless. It's about acting rightly even when fear is screaming in your ears. It's telling the truth when silence feels safer. It's apologizing when your pride wants to hold back. It's daring to live your principles when everyone else settles for convenience. Courage is what turns philosophy from theory into action. Here's the paradox. People think living with virtue is hard. In reality, it makes life easier. You don't have to juggle lies. You don't need to remember what mask you wore for which crowd. You don't carry the anxiety of constant performance. When virtue becomes your compass, you're free, not because life gets easier, but because your direction is clear. So how? Do you actually apply this? You don't need rituals or dramatic vows. Just pause before each meaningful decision and ask 4 questions. Does this align with justice? Is this guided by wisdom or by impulse? Am I acting with temperance or indulging? Does this choice call for courage I'm avoiding? You won't always get it right, but asking is already a form of awareness. It breaks autopilot. It pulls you out of instinct and points you back to your center. Some days you'll get tired of being the good one. You'll crave the easy way. That's when you remind yourself, virtue isn't about applause. It's about self-respect. In crisis, in confusion, when the world is foggy and outcomes are unpredictable, virtue won't hand you instant answers, but it will give you something more important, and access to rotate around. When everything else spins out of control, you can stay centered because you know which way is north. If you're lost in your career, use justice and wisdom as your guide. Does this job serve something right, or is it twisting my values? If you're stuck in a relationship, lean on temperance and courage. Am I speaking my truth or hiding out of fear? Before any major decision, pause and ask not what's easy, not what's convenient, but what's right. That one shift in questioning can reorient an entire life. Whether you're in your 20s feeling the weight of choices, in your 30s battling burnout, or in your 40s wrestling with disillusionment, virtue is always a compass you can return to. A person anchored in virtue may drift, but they are never truly lost. They know which way home is. And if your mind still feels like a storm, don't rush into action just to feel better. Stop. Be still. Ask yourself, what am I really living for? Does my direction align with the person I want to become? If the answer isn't clear, then it's time to come back to virtue. Practice now in the small things, your words, your choices, your daily reactions. Once virtue becomes habit, you won't have to ask so often. You'll simply know. Still, life won't stop testing you. You'll face moments when emotions surge like floods, leaving you little time to think. That's when the final lesson becomes clear, the ability to step back from emotion without becoming numb. Emotional detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity under pressure. Think about it. Most of our daily interactions aren't with the real version of ourselves. They're with a version shaped by old wounds, fears, and unprocessed anger. Emotions blur reality like dust on a mirror. If you never learn to wipe the glass clean, you'll live in distortion, reacting instead of responding. Detachment is the practice of love with discipline, protecting your integrity, while refusing to let pain dictate your behavior. In today's culture of authenticity, people often assume every feeling deserves expression, but some truths come from lower ground, raw, reactive, unprocessed. Stoic wisdom calls you higher. Feel deeply but act wisely. Slow down like a driver in fog. Don't slam the accelerator. Steady yourself. Breathe. Choose your next move. Every pause before snapping back. Every breath before an impulsive word. Every moment you choose peace instead of ego. Those are victories. They don't erase your humanity. They elevate it. You're not silencing emotions, you're learning to see them for what they are. Signals, not commands. And here lies the quiet rebellion. In a world that rewards outrage, emotional detachment is resistance. Not loud resistance, but graceful. The kind that doesn't need to shout to prove its strength. The Stoics understood this. Restraint isn't weakness. It's power, sharpened into silence. So if you've ever said something you regret, acted out of pain, or let emotions drag you where you didn't want to go, congratulations, you're human. But now you're also awake. And awakening is the first step toward freedom. We've just walked through 15 Stoic lessons, not to turn you into a philosopher lost in thought, but to teach you how to live a life of clarity, strength, and intention. Each lesson is a rebellion against noise. Each one sharpens your awareness, helps you step off autopilot, and calls you back to the person you always suspected you could be. You've seen that. Intelligence isn't about knowing more, it's about staying calm when others panic, about curiosity instead of judgment, about questioning before believing, about making decisions even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. You've seen that wisdom isn't a trophy, it's a discipline. That solitude can be strength, that self-criticism can be love, that discomfort can be training, that virtue not success is the compass. Most of all, you've seen this. True strength is choosing your response when emotion demands you react blindly. It's holding still when life tries to shake you. It's staying awake when everyone else drifts into comfort. If something stirred in you, even a flicker, don't let it pass. Write it down. Leave a comment. Not for us, but for you, to mark the moment you stopped running from yourself. And if this journey has meant something to you, Subscribe not because we need another number, but because you need a place to return to, a place to keep building clarity, sharpness, and quiet strength week after week. Thank you for staying until the end. Because if you're still here, you're not just surviving, you're choosing to live on purpose. And maybe, just maybe, like me, you're done wasting time. You're ready now. And this time you won't turn back. If this lesson struck a chord with you, pause and reflect. What belief or habit have you followed blindly, without questioning, and how might it be holding you back? Drop your answer in the comments or explore our Stoic Wisdom playlist to go deeper into lessons that challenge comfort, sharpen your mind, and help you live with unshuckable clarity.